The online education platform Canvas is mostly back online today after a cyber attack left students and teachers at thousands of schools and universities scrambling. More than 8,000 schools at every level, including colleges and universities across the world, use Canvas to submit assignments, access course materials, and manage grades. The outage came at one of the worst possible times, forcing some universities to delay final exams. The cyber attack has raised many questions about schools' vulnerability, the dependence on such platforms, and other risks. Allie Rogin zeroes in on those concerns. Allie?
That's right, Amna. Canvas's parent company, Instructure, says it detected an initial breach on April 29th before a second hack yesterday brought Canvas fully offline. A group called Shiny Hunters claimed responsibility, reportedly threatening to leak billions of private messages and other records, giving a deadline of this Sunday to negotiate a settlement. Instructure says Canvas is now back online, and it will continue to monitor the situation, but the incident raises questions about our educational system's reliance on technology and what happens when that technology becomes a liability. For more, I'm joined by Luke Connolly, a threat intelligence analyst at MCSoft, a cybersecurity firm. Luke, thank you so much for joining us. We know that this is still a very fluid situation, but what do we know so far about how this hack unfolded?
Well, as you said, it seems to have taken place at the end of April. There are a number of techniques that these cyber criminals use in order to gain access. But once they gained access, they apparently started exfiltrating or downloading, stealing data from the customers of Instructure, which are universities and school boards across North America. So there are universities and schools affected in the United States, affected in Canada, and beyond as well. And from the dark website, which is maintained by the criminal group Shiny Hunters, they made the claim, and with an initial deadline of the 6th of May. And there was a second post yesterday saying that they've extended the deadline, as you've said. And when I checked the dark website this morning, neither of those posts are still there. So there's no longer a threat up, and the data has not been released on Shiny Hunter's data repository site. So something has happened today. And as you say, the situation is changing day to day and hour to hour.
So let's talk about the scope of this hack. The hackers say that about 275 million teachers, students, staffers were affected. Of course, that's their assertion. We don't know any. There hasn't been any independent confirmation. But what can you tell us about how big of a deal this is?
Well, it really comes down to what information all of those educational institutions, all the schools and universities and colleges are actually using this application for. I don't have visibility into that. There hasn't been any significant data shared online by the criminal group. So whether they were able to download this amount of data and how compromising the data is, how much personal information has been downloaded is up for debate. They have told us, as you said, that they have personally identifiable information. They've told us that they have millions of records of conversations, personal conversations between teachers and students, but they're also criminals, so we don't really know. That could be the case, but it could be a lie in order to try to pressure the victims to pay a ransom or an extortion fee.
What sort of questions, though, would you have about the vulnerability of this platform, aside from questions about what exactly was accessed this time? But just the fact that these hackers were able to access this much information from this many individuals, what does that say about the vulnerabilities that exist?
Well, if they're able to gain that level of access that lets them see customer data across thousands of customers, universities, school boards, schools, teachers, students, administrative staff, there's a privilege, there's an access issue that's pretty severe. And over the last 15 years, we've had this transition from companies and schools, buying software, installing it on a computer on their premises in their building and running it to accomplish their tasks. And we've moved towards having all of that data residing in the cloud with companies like Salesforce and Instructure, and all of that data and all of the infrastructure is now maintained by them. So we have to, part of that contract should be that they're taking adequate measures to protect the data, because the data is really where the value is, and the data is really potentially compromising for minor age students as well as teachers and staff. And what we're seeing is that the threat actors are often targeting these software providers, software as a service providers, because if they're able to breach them once, they can get access to hundreds or thousands of schools and potentially millions or even hundreds of millions of student records. So it's a pretty dire situation.
To that point, are we over-reliant on these sort of educational technology platforms to be handling all of this sensitive information?
That's a good question. And it comes down to what budgets do the schools have if they were to maintain this infrastructure in-house. One of the benefits, as I mentioned, of going towards a software as a service offering is that you make the assumption that the service provider is going to have some specific skills and expertise in order to properly set up a cyber defensive strategy. Unfortunately, that's being demonstrated not to be the case, because this is not the first time that a software provider providing software as a service to schools has been hacked. And there was a case early in 2025, and there were again millions of records breached in that incident.
Luke Connolly with MCSoft, thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Support journalism you trust. Support PBS News. Donate now, or even better, start a monthly contribution today.